have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
USA, I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup. Hi.
And we are thrilled this week to have as our guest the legendary veteran activist Urvashi Vaid to tell us about the National LGBTQ plus Women's Survey, which you can fill out if you are, the planned American LGBTQ plus Museum, her decades of advocacy, and her take on the current state of our movements.
All in 20 minutes. We'll cover a lot of ground with her. Meanwhile, the U.S. Supreme Court has let stand a ruling that a florist illegally discriminated against a gay couple. This is really important. We'll explain why.
Oh, on the other hand, Ohio enacted a law letting healthcare workers cite their religious beliefs to discriminate against LGBTQ people.
And in other bad news, Iowa's High Court overturned a finding of anti-gay discrimination by former Republican Governor Terry Branstad.
But a trans student in Minnesota reached a settlement with a school district there that discriminated against him.
And in the United Kingdom, the Methodist Church has approved same-sex marriages.
And Argentina did something that I hope more countries will do, reserving a percentage of public sector jobs for trans people.
What a concept. But there is trouble in the nations of Georgia, Russia, and Israel.
On the other hand, a trans teen's artwork is commanding millions at auction.
It's the modern age.
We went into the wrong business, Ann.
That's okay. I'm content.
Me too.
Yeah, I think, well, let's bring on our guest, the, as you say, legendary activist, Urvashi Vaid. Urvashi has done it all.
Well, we're of that generation that all of us can say that, right?
Well, I think you top the list. From the ACLU Prison Project to Gay Community News in Boston to running the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, the Arcus Foundation, what else?
Well, we have a picture I want to put up of you protesting the elder President Bush in 1990 over AIDS. This was a very bold move, but it wasn't your first. Your first demonstration was an anti-war protest at the age of 11.
Well, I happened to grow up in a tiny town in upstate New York called Potsdam, where my dad was a college professor. So there were the anti-war protests, walking right by our house, and because the students were even up there were protesting. So I think that was probably my first protest, just kind of curiosity, but also affinity. I think early on, I felt an affinity for social change activism. There were about 3 channels when we were growing up, right? So the coverage, my family, we watched the 6:30 news or together, the national news, Walter Cronkite or NBC. And they were covering the civil rights movement. They were covering the anti-war movement a little bit. And it was I just thought, A, it was right. B, I wanted to join. And it just touched me.
I had the same experience. I'm older than you, but I was watching the same things, and it just reached out of that screen and grabbed me.
And you were giving speeches for George McGovern at the age of 12. That was my first vote and my only happy vote for president.
Yeah, I had the chance to speak at because I had good grades, so I got to speak at some assembly and in junior high. And in 72, what are you going to do except talk about McGovern?
Well, did you come from a progressive family and household that supported you in this?
I came from my parents were both artists in a way. I mean, actually, they were. My dad was a writer, and that's what he wanted to be ever since he was a young man. And he was a really important Hindi language writer. And he wrote novels, some plays, short stories, amazing, experimental novels in Hindi. And my mom started being a poet in her 60s and became a painter. She was amazing in her 70s. And until she passed, she painted these incredible abstract canvases. So when I grew up, our house was full of ideas, books, people with ideas, mostly artists. A lot of their friends in India and here were artists, dancers, poets, writers, visual artists. And so my parents, though, were not political activists. They never saw that as their calling. And my dad and I had many arguments about, is art more important than politics? And I always say that they finally got what I was doing when they read my book, Virtual Equality. They were like, oh, that's what she's been talking about activism. It kind of had to be translated into a medium that they respected.
That was back in 1995, Virtual Equality, the mainstreaming of gay and lesbian liberation. And you subsequently wrote Irresistible Revolution, confronting race, class, and the assumptions of LGBT politics in 2012.
Yeah. When I left the task force, I decided I wanted to write a book, and I had no idea. And I credit the late Jed Mattis. Do you remember Jed? He was an advocate in New York, very involved in our community, helped Hetrick Martin establish itself, among others. And he happened to be a literary agent. He was the only literary agent I had ever met in my life. And at that time, and I wrote to him and said, Jed, I'm thinking about writing a book. Will you just, tell me what I should do? And he said, not only will I tell you what you should do, but I'll represent you. And he encouraged me to write him a letter describing the book I wanted to write. He said, don't worry about a proposal. Just tell me what you want to write. And that's how it began. So I outlined this idea about writing from my experience, a sort of a political analysis of the queer movement at the time. And that's what Virtual Equality was. It was a critique that argued that we really needed to be centered on social justice and a broader view of rights and liberation rather than a narrow view. And then I just I talked about a lot of different aspects of my own life and work.
So I thought we'd get to the bigger overview a little later in this, but we're here now. So before we get to talking about the survey and the museum and everything, how's this working out? How's the movement doing? What's your bird's eye view of all this?
I mean, we have to be proud of what so many thousands and thousands of activists have accomplished. I credit all of us, literally hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people, queer people, especially LGBTQ people in towns all over this country who stood up and fought back and said, this is wrong, and challenged every institution, starting with our own families, right? Faith-based institutions, governments, nonprofits, service providers, every single space. And that's what has enabled our movement to be so vibrant to this day. It still exists. It's alive. And I really value that. I think that, at the national level, the movement has also changed. Its leadership is more reflective. There are a lot of people of color who are running major institutions. In fact, the task force, HRC, National Center for Lesbian Rights, Gay and Lesbian Advocates and Defenders, it's phenomenal, are run by incredibly talented leaders who've been in our movement and stepped up to take the helm. And that gives me a lot of encouragement. I think our obstacles are deeper and greater than ever. I think there's a lot of complacency in our movement, which worries me. And I think that there's a lot of ignoring of the fact that not all parts of our community are doing well. So I'll start with that. I mean, the obstacles are the right wing. They're strong, they're deep, they're well-funded, they're relentless. Kate and I debate, is the right wing like, are they vampires or are they zombies or are they aliens? And it's a serious discussion that's kind of a thread.
We have a picture of you.
All of the above. All of the above.
All of the above. It could be different manifestations at different times, but like Game of Thrones, they're the White Walkers, literally, right? and
yeah.
If you've ever seen that, I don't know, Anne, you probably.
I'm too busy watching.
And you didn't see Game of Thrones, but some of us.
You're watching Game of Thrones. I'm watching The Real Housewives.
But you referenced Kate Clinton, your partner since 1998.
Actually, 1988.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, we met at the war conference.
Oh my God, the war conference. Yes, we were both there. Well, you're now running your own organization, the VAD Group. So you're doing strategic counseling. What do you tell people about fighting back against the right wing and Mitch McConnell and everybody else who's out to kill us?
Well, it's a two-pronged strategy. You got to have political power, so we have to defeat them politically, starting at the local, state level, and then working up to the national. Too many people go right to the national. We have got to really win at the local level. City councils, mayors, state legislatures, governors, judicials, appointments, DAs, everything. And then the other thing that we have to do is to continue the fight culturally. So you got to defeat the right politically and culturally. And the cultural struggle is about what we learned from our own experience, being a despised minority. How do you turn outlaws into in-laws? That's what we did. What a win, right?
Yeah, cute.
Despised outlaws. Now where everybody's like, oi, they're the in-laws. They're coming over again. And I think we have to sort of combat the right wing culturally by engaging with people. All 75 million people who voted for Trump, or however many of them are, can't be written off. You have to take the fight to them in terms of our stories of our lives, argue with them, push back and say, well, we can find common ground here. We can't find common ground here. I really believe that's the only way to win.
Well, they do poll. They do.
There's so many lies and disinformation. Sorry, Andy.
No, they do polling, and now it says a majority of Republicans support same-sex marriage, but they also support candidates who vote against all of our rights.
I know, it's kooky. So I think there's some kind of disconnect. I don't know if we'll be able to overcome the kind of, if it's true aliens, you can't really overcome that.
Well, isn't it about their priorities, though? They may be with us on some of these issues, but their priorities, we're not their priority when they then go into the voting booth. And what the heck are we going to do about Kirsten Sinema?
I guess she must have ambitions for higher office. And I don't know, because she started out quite a bit more progressive than she's manifesting right now. So I think it's about making a strategic calculation about how she has to get reelected in that state, which is tough. It's a tough state. I think I'm trying to be generous and believe that her heart is in the right place. I think she's certainly earned the right to be trusted a little bit, I think, or a lot. No politician in my experience has ever voted entirely the way I would like them to vote. There's few who have. Political, Barney always used to say, Barney Frank was like, it's all about compromise and you have to be willing to compromise, which is probably why none of us ever went into mainstream politics. Like, we're kind of uncompromising people. And you can be that way as an advocate because you can push. And that's really necessary. But some people have to go in there and negotiate and argue. So I guess that's what she's doing.
Well, Barney also said, I think, that the only politician who he ever voted for who was pure was himself in his first race only.
Well, I do wonder sometimes what it would have been like if Milk hadn't been murdered. He was pretty amazing. And people like that ilk. Or I wonder sometimes what it would have been like if we had Ginny Apuzzo running. She was one of my heroes coming up as a young activist, and I still look up to her. And she's just so smart and always had this honesty in whatever she said. And that's what I relate to in a political leader is honesty. Tell me the truth. If you can't vote a certain way, tell me why. And tell me the truth.
So one of the ways we're trying to get honest is with this survey that you have now created, because we need data, we need facts. So tell us about this LGBTQ plus women's survey.
It starts, we need more information about all parts of our community because we have been so invisibilized. We are not routinely included in mainstream surveys or data collection. But more deeply than that, I was thinking about, with a lot of people, I was thinking about how many LGBTQ women there are and how little we know about us. And what are our families like? How many of us have kids? What kinds of experiences are we having today of discrimination? We've had some data and some breakthroughs in the federal collection of information that allows us to gather insights. Bianca Wilson at the Williams Institute has assembled a great compilation of health and socioeconomic information about LGBTQ women from a couple of national surveys that have been done recently, like post 2017. But we really wanted to go deeper. And that's what the LGBTQ plus women survey is about. And I encourage, and we also wanted to create a really inclusive platform, because the thing about lesbians is that many of us, there's all different kinds of lesbian experience. I think it's more varied than gay men, to be honest. You've got lesbians who are lesbians until graduation. You've got lesbians who were married to a guy for 40 years and then fell in love with their next door neighbor and came out. You've got lesbians who were lesbians with a woman for 40 years and then decided to go, they fell in love with a man or decided to be with men. You've got trans people and trans men. You've got, trans lesbians, and you've got non-binary queers. You've got aromantic lesbians. It's like every varying. And I think we are such a range. We wanted to allow our community to express that. And the survey is incredibly inclusive in that it encourages all sorts of people who might identify or have had lesbian experience to share. And welcomes that. So our goal is to really try to take this information, get it back out to community-based organizations, service providers, advocacy groups, and say, what does it mean that what should we be doing in terms of our advocacy agenda, in terms of the services we're developing for our community, how we talk about our community. We hope that it gives a clearer picture. I was really impressed by the National Transgender Discrimination Study that was done by NCTE and the task force. They did a couple of rounds of them, and they're, I think, about to do a third round. The first round was in 2011, and the next was in 2015. And those community surveys were the first time we had a kind of a 360 picture of trans people from trans people's own voices. And I've read those and used those, and it gave me so much insight, and used those for organizing in so many different contexts. And I thought, wouldn't it be great if we could have that kind of archive about queer women?
So for the benefit of our podcast listeners, the link is LGBTQ Women's Survey.
Women's Survey,
Womensurvey.org. It's open just to people in the USA, but it is, as you say, open to people who have identified as women at any point in their journeys.
Yes. It's really, we're trying to be as inclusive as we can. And the reason we didn't do global is we just don't have the bandwidth. And there are great people around the world who are doing comparable work.
And we'll put a link to the survey in our weekly show notes. So go to gayusatv.org if you're not already signed up with us, and you can access the survey through a link there. And this is not your only project. You're also on the board of this new LGBTQ plus museum.
Yeah, the American Museum of LGBTQ History and Culture is an effort to create a national museum in New York. And I've been on the board about 3 years. think the project started about, I think 2017, with a group of people meeting and trying to figure this out. It's really exciting. We have a number of great projects, history projects, archive projects around the country. The One Archive in LA. There's a Stonewall Museum in Florida. So there's a lot of great institutions. We felt there was space and need for a national institution that will be based in New York, that is really documenting the stories and plurality of queer experience, and especially the stories of our movement. And collecting information, doing exhibitions, focusing on developing educational materials and curricula that can teach about our movement's histories.
So that's the LGBTQ, the word plus, museum.org. This is part of an expansion of the New York Historical Society.
Well, we made a partnership with the New York Historical Society, which is run by the brilliant Louise Mirror. And the Historical Society had done exhibits and exhibitions about LGBTQ history over the years. And I think we partnered with them. And then they approached us about the fact that they're going to build an addition to the Historical Society building in New York, and they wondered if we wanted to partner with them on that, and we did. And we together went to the city council and secured some funding from the mayor and the city council, and of course the bulk of it will be raised privately for this edition. And the idea is that the museum, the LGBTQ museum, will have a floor within this new edition when it's built, and we'll be able to use that to program our exhibits, have a physical space with its own, access and entry, but will be incubated in a way by the Historical Society, one of the oldest museum in New York, and learn from them about what it takes to run a museum well, and every little detail we're going to have to learn. And I think it's so exciting for us as a startup to be able to be sponsored in this way by an experienced institution. And ultimately, our goal is to have a freestanding building that is at least 75,000 square feet, that allows us the range of exhibits and multimedia, interactive, accessible programs that we can do. In between now and that vision, we're going to use virtual programming, and when we are able to do in-person events to curate all sorts of conversations and hopefully eventually exhibits about our communities
and that's on Central Park
movement history.
That's on Central Park West between 77th and 76th Street. I believe this is going to be on the 76th Street side. When do you expect this to possibly open?
I think the building, the good thing is that they have plans and are ready to move forward with but it's going to take a couple of years. So I suspect 4 years before the building opens.
Okay.
But it's not like nothing will happen in between now and then. The existing building exists, and we can program within that and do events.
And how can people connect to this project?
Go on the website, and you can sign up. We can send you more information. You can learn more about it. The American LGBTQ Museum.
It's really a perfect idea. And when you hear about it, you think, why didn't this happen a long time ago? But the timing is probably perfect. And this system of getting it in place, and as you say, being mentored by the Historical Society is just delicious. It's so good. So you're doing this, you're doing the survey, you're running your counseling organization and doing, I'm sure, 9 million other things. And at the same time, facing the challenge of breast cancer, which you've been quite open about to confront. So how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. But it's an experience that so many millions of us have, cancer and breast cancer. So many lesbians and queer women have it, and people have it, queer people. And I think one of the reasons I'm out about it is that I think it's important for people to know that that we walk among you, that we're doing incredible things, that a cancer diagnosis is very serious and it affects me at different points where I'm like really weak and whatever. But in general, I'm doing a lot, and probably doing so with a sense of urgency that I didn't have before, because what I have is metastatic cancer. And that's pretty grim in terms of its ultimate prognosis. But I was joking with you earlier that there's a couple of things that I would note. One is that it's for somebody who railed against big pharma most of my life. Now I find myself cheering them on. I'm here because of
situational ethics.
I'm here because of drugs, and the second piece of that is because of health insurance. And this is why we need universal health insurance, so every single person has excellent access. And I'm lucky enough to have health insurance through my little consulting business. And that enables me to access healthcare. And the drug companies enable me to access clinical trials that allow me to be able to benefit from advances in medicine, like targeted therapies. The old chemo was just, which I had when I first got breast cancer 9 years ago, it just killed the good cells and the bad. It was like drinking bleach, to bring back an old.
Oh no!
But the newer chemos are more targeted, and they attach to the cancer cells through mechanisms kind of like the new coronavirus vaccines. Yeah. They're delivered attached to certain proteins on the cancer cell, and they deliver the chemo into the cell so they don't cause systemic damage, which is kind of remarkable. It's just in my life, I've seen that progress, as I have with HIV. Each of us has lived through a number of these life-threatening situations in our community and in our families and in our closest friends' lives, or not lived through them, as so many people we lost. And it reminds me of all the things we were fighting for during the height of the AIDS epidemic, better access to treatments and healthcare and health insurance, for everybody, cheaper drugs so they're more affordable to more people, and more investment in research and, making that a priority for this country. It's kind of astonishing that cancer is so prevalent and people talk about it as if it can't be, it's just, it is what it is. But actually it isn't. It can be tackled in creative ways. And a lot of cancers just require basic research.
But these are the fights that have gone on from time immemorial and are continuing of, are we going to care about taking care of people? And are we going to do what needs to be done to give everyone a shot at a healthy and productive life?
It brings us back full circle to where we started, which is political power.
Yeah.
We cannot win these fights without the power to win them. And that means better candidates running who aren't afraid to stand up and push the envelope. That means more of us voting. L-PAC, which is the lesbian super PAC that I helped start in 2012, just last couple of years has done some surveying of using like Celinda Lake's firm to do national sort of surveys of lesbians and straight women and men, and doing some comparative. You can find the data at projectlpac.org, which is the 501c3 arm of the Super PAC. And there's 2 studies. And what they show is that even though a majority of lesbians are registered voters, there's a significant number who aren't registered. Like, I think if memory serves me correct, it was like 19%. And then there's another significant number, like 14% or something, that are very alienated from politics and don't see much difference between the parties and don't, therefore, aren't motivated to vote, even when they have a great deal of political awareness.
Yeah.
We do want to congratulate L-PAC because 4 of your endorsed candidates, and they're real progressives. I mean, have won council seats in New York. Lynn Shulman and Tiffany Caban in Queens, Kristen Richardson Jordan in Harlem, and Crystal Hudson in Brooklyn. So,
And both Kristen and Crystal will be, I think, the first Black lesbians, Black queer people in the city women in the city council.
that's great.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Real strong progressives.
Yeah.
Well, L-PAC is terrific, and it's run by the brilliant Lisa Turner, who's just one of the best political minds around and a really smart woman, and has a great group of board members that have really shepherded this organization, and a bunch of supporters. And everybody can support L-PAC. You don't have to be a wealthy person. $10, whatever you can give, helps the organization invest in candidates that are lesbians and that are pro-lesbian and pro-racial justice and pro-women's rights.
And the majority of the city council in New York will be women for the first time.
Well, this will be an interesting experiment in New York City, the city that doesn't work.
You think, well, when it becomes a total mess, that's when the women come in, right?
Yeah. We'll see. We shall see.
You think we're going to get a woman mayor? What's your belief?
Oh, eventually, but not right now.
Not this time?
No. But so go back to work. You have too many projects. We have more news to give our audience, but thanks, Irv.
Thank you both so much for having me.
Love to Kate, and we'll see you soon.
We'll see you soon. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
And do sign up for our email list because we have a lot of links to give you about what we just talked about. Go to gayusatv.org and sign up for our email list, and we will give them to you.
Yes, we will. All right, where are we going to go first?
Well, I mean, where should we go first?
How about our big win in the Supreme Court?
Absolutely. The court will refuse to take up the appeal of Arlene's Flowers in Richland, Washington, who violated state law when the owner would not sell flowers to a longtime customer, Robert Ingersoll, there on the right with his now husband, Kurt Fried, for their wedding. She said her religious beliefs were being violated. Thomas Alito and Gorsuch wanted to take up the case, but the florist will now have to pay a $1,000 penalty.
So this is the third of these cases that have gone to the Supreme Court. And there's this great misunderstanding about what's going on. The first case was the Masterpiece Cake Shop case from Colorado. Everybody thought we lost it, but in fact, it was just a technical decision that the Colorado Human Rights Commission had been mean to the cake shop by making anti-religious statements, which I could dispute, but nonetheless, so no decision on whether religious beliefs trumped non-discrimination laws. Then we get to Philadelphia and the adoption and foster care agency case, the Catholics who didn't want to serve same-sex parents, and the city that had a non-discrimination law and said you have to or we're taking your funding away. Again, the court made a technical decision that said the city had been not appropriate in the way that they took money away from the agency. But again, no decision on religion versus anti-discrimination laws. Here in Washington, while the court didn't make a decision, they let a lower court decision stand. What they let stand was a finding of the court that religious beliefs, so-called, could not overrule the non-discrimination law of Washington in the case of selling flowers for a wedding. And this is a huge win, I think, for us, although it's not a national standard yet, but it is the first time that the court has stood behind a ruling that upholds non-discrimination laws in the face of a challenge from someone claiming a religious exemption.
The court giveth and the court taketh away, because they also, by 6-3, struck down, upheld Arizona's voter suppression laws and overturned California's right to find out who's donating to these dark money campaigns. So only
all true, but in the realm of religion versus non-discrimination laws, this is what we've been waiting for as a first step anyway.
Whatever she mentioned, power. We can't get back power unless we can win elections, and we can't win elections if there's all this voter suppression going on. So that's a reason to go after Kirsten Sinema, who back in 2010 opposed the filibuster passionately. Now she supports it.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. In Ohio, though, they enacted a law allowing healthcare workers, hospitals, insurance companies to refuse services based on moral, ethical, or religious beliefs. Governor DeWine signed it and said, well, you can just go to another provider. Well, you can't always do that. It's outrageous.
It's the old thing. Yeah, but I don't believe Ohio has a non-discrimination law, does it?
No.
But maybe, but certainly some cities there do. So if you ran into this, you might be able to sue on the basis of a city law.
We've got to sue to get this law overturned.
Yeah, but good news from New Jersey, where the appeals court there upheld the lower court ruling that the organization Jonah, an Orthodox Jewish organization practicing conversion therapy that had been ordered to stop doing it, had in fact concealed itself by just changing its name and was still doing it. And so they still have to they're still forbidden to do it and have to pay fines.
Fines, it's like millions of dollars because they violated their agreement not to do this anymore.
Yeah.
In Minnesota, a trans student, Matt Woods, we have a picture there of him with his mom, reached a settlement versus his former school district, Buffalo, Hanover, Montrose, which prohibited his use of boys' restrooms and locker rooms in the 6th grade. He was hospitalized for mental health issues due to the discrimination, and the schools have to pay $218,000 and adopt trans-inclusive policies. It was a gender justice group that brought the case.
And we'll see what happens with the New York City school that has now been sued by parents of a 6th grader who was relentlessly bullied by his classmates when he came out as gay in 6th grade. The school, of course, said, oh, this is inappropriate to discuss in middle school, and really he brought it on himself. And
the father's gay too, Jason Cianciato. But this went on for 2 years, and he eventually took him out of the school. Long Island City.
It is beyond my ability to understand how schools can refuse to deal with bullying. I mean, how is that even possible?
There's only a handful that do, and they do it well. And it's changing the school culture, but most don't want to put the effort in, which would help all students.
Well, even if you just punish the bullies, they won't even do that.
It is an endemic problem. They pass policies and they don't enforce them. All right.
In Iowa, a court overturned a discrimination verdict. Christopher Godfrey, who'd been in charge on the right there, who'd been in charge of workers' comp programs, was fired and claimed that the governor, Terry Branstad, the then governor, had fired him because he was gay. He went to court and he won. Well, he
won $4.6 million.
Yeah. Well, now there was another hearing in the case, and the court, the appeals court, overturned the findings of the jury in the original case. This is unheard of, the finding of facts, and say that Branstad did not discriminate against this guy.
Godfrey now works for the U.S. Department of Labor, but this decision is an outrage by a Republican court.
Yep.
All right. Back to New Jersey. Oh, no. We have.
Let's go to the Biden administration.
All right.
A little good news. The president has appointed the first out lesbian of ambassador rank. There have been some gay men appointed to actual ambassadorships. This is
a lot.
This is the first lesbian. Chantal Wong has been appointed as a director of the Asian Development Bank And this is an ambassador level position, and congratulations to her.
She's also the first LGBTQ person of color appointed to an ambassador level position. She's got 30 years experience in the field. The White House formed an interagency task force on safety, inclusion, and opportunity for transgender people. I hope they do what we're going to tell you Argentina did. And
a trans member, a former member of the Army, has won a case. He's a client of the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. His name is Gavin, and he was forced out of the Army in 2008. And the Army demanded repayment of $77,000 in medical school payments they had made on his behalf. He sued, and he has now won.
Great. Yeah. The Human Rights Campaign is feeling the heat about how their corporate allies often support the politicians hurting us. They are not incorporating this into their corporate equality index, just saying that index should not be used as a shield to defend their actions. Take the next step.
Look, in 1996, the Human Rights Campaign did not include the Senate votes on DOMA in their scorecard on politicians because so many politicians voted for DOMA, and HRC realized it would lower their rankings, and they wanted to give high rankings to politicians. So now they're doing the same thing on corporate donations to right-wing politicians. Terrible.
Back in New Jersey, they've adopted a policy requiring state prisons to house trans people according to their gender identity rather than sex assigned at birth. It was a settlement of a suit by the ACLU. There are only a handful of states that do this, but it's progress.
And Governor Murphy of New Jersey has elevated the first assistant attorney general to temporarily fill the position of attorney general. He's an out gay man, Andrew Brock.
And the last guy went out the door apologizing for the mistreatment of gay bars.
Right. But that was a good thing that he did that.
Okay.
Okay. In Rochester, New York, a Black queer woman, Kim Smith, has been elected to the city council to an at-large seat. Congratulations to her.
We have a correction from last week.
Oh, yeah.
Fred, we said that Mike Gravel, who died this past week, was the only presidential candidate, a major party that we ever had on the show. No, it was our friend Fred Karger, who ran for the Republican nomination.
Fred, I still have the T-shirts. I'm sorry we forgot you last week, but our viewer, Robert, called me up and said, hey, what about Fred? And he was exactly right.
We want to note the passing of Mimi Stern-Wolf, a pianist and conductor who specialized in musical programs with a social justice or political theme, including an annual concert of music by composers lost to AIDS. Died at the age of 84, complications from strokes, survived by her partner of 30 years, poet Ilsa Gilbert.
It's sort of the musical version of visual AIDS, which curates and displays the art of artists lost to AIDS, and this is about musicians lost to AIDS. We also want to note in Lincoln, Nebraska, that the mayor has chosen an out lesbian, Teresa Ewens, to be the new police chief of Lincoln. She comes from the police force in San Francisco, but she is now going to run the police force in Lincoln, Nebraska.
And we want to note the saga of Sha'Carri Richardson, the out lesbian gold medal favorite for the 100 meters in Tokyo. But when she tested positive for marijuana use, she was stripped of that. And now she's not even invited to be a part of the team at all. There's a lot of blowback about this.
Oh, people are losing their minds over it. And that's great. It's great that people see this as injustice and are speaking up about it. But it's also, you know, Sha'Carri has said very openly that she understands what she did. She understands that made her ineligible. And sad as that is, she accepts that.
And two more cis Black women have been banned from the Olympics due to their natural testosterone levels. Christine Mboma and Beatrice Masalingi, both 18 from Namibia. These are rules that limit the career of cis lesbian Caster Semenya of South Africa. 3 medalists from the 2016 Olympics have refused to take drugs to lower their testosterone levels and are also banned. So this is a mess.
Well, it's, we say this over and over again. They're not asking tall people to cut off their legs to even the playing field on the basketball court. So if people have naturally high testosterone levels, why are they being asked to mess around with that so that they will level the playing field? And P.S., and this is true of trans athletes across the country and the way they're being discriminated against, there is no evidence that this makes a big difference in their performance levels. So this is just arbitrary and mutilating. Back to politics. Thank you to Governor Beshear of Kentucky, who declared Pride Month. He declared it on June 30th.
Better late than never.
Yeah, I guess so. In New York, Mayor de Blasio released Work It NYC, a guide to LGBTQI plus workplace inclusivity and training. Let's see.
Well, in the new budget, they put like $2 million for LGBTQ curricula. $2 million? I mean, come on. You got to transform the system. Especially when there's a lot of anti-gay violence out there still. And we're going to talk about Dr. Saina Rezai, 29 years old, attacked as he got off the train in the Village at 3 o'clock Saturday morning. It was called an anti-gay slur, and then a half a block later was kicked and punched from behind, had his jaw broken in 2 places, wired shut with emergency surgery.
In Miami, Representative Maria Elena Salazar, a Republican, invited LGBT leaders in for a conversation. Now, that's sort of surrealism in everyday life to begin with. She had voted against the Equality Act, so people went to talk to her. And were, I think, probably a little surprised to find that she was quite firm in that stance, believes that the Equality Act interferes with religious freedom, and really was not interested in listening to a different opinion.
Makes you miss Donna Shalala, who she beat.
Why did she invite them in? Why did she invite them in?
In Utah, 1,000 Brigham Young University students had a Pride March. Just for themselves. It was not sponsored by the school, of course. It was on June 28th, but the administration has not responded to this outpouring.
Well, they do outlaw same-sex couples or relationships. They no longer throw you out just for being gay, but you cannot have any kind of relationship or affection or anything else. In Texas, the governor has announced he is having a special session of the legislature so that he can finally pass that no trans kids in sports law and a lot of other horrible things. And let's see, and Coke gave people the right to design their own labels for Pride, but they outlawed using the word lesbian.
Another job for Urvashi Vaid.
Yeah. That comes later. All right. Moving on to international. Yeah.
Well, we start off in Spain. This is a horrible story. In A Coruña, Samuel Luis, 24 years old, a nursing assistant, he was attacked as he left a club. He was making a video call, and then somebody on the street said, "Are you filming me?" And he said, "No, I'm on a call." And the guy punched him. Then the perpetrator comes back with 12 people and beat him unconscious, taken to the hospital where he died. The Prime Minister, Pedro Sanchez, has denounced the killing and calling it savage and merciless and promised they will be brought to justice. The attacker shouted anti-gay slurs. There have been protests across Spain about this horrible, horrible incident.
In Croatia, in Zagreb, thugs attacked the Pride Parade. It's the first time the parade has been attacked in 10 years. It has proceeded peacefully in the meantime. There were assaults, a flag was burned. Things are getting really ugly in Eastern Europe.
Well, Hungary's dictator Viktor Orban says the Euro leaders who are attacking his bigotry are behaving like colonialists, citing their colonial past. The heads of 17 EU countries signed a joint letter condemning the new anti-LGBTQ laws in Hungary.
And in South Korea, a military court has convicted consenting gay soldiers of indecency for being caught having oral sex. The court described this as bordering on rape and molestation, but the offenders were given a 6-month suspended sentence. But I suppose having this on their record is not going to help them.
In Ghana, it's a majority Christian nation where same-sex relations are already punishable by 3 years in prison. Well, they've introduced a bill to criminalize any LGBTQ advocacy, and they want to promote conversion therapy.
And wait a second, where was that?
Ghana.
Oh, Ghana. In good news, let's throw in a little good news. In Argentina, the government has announced that they will hold 1% of public sector jobs for trans people.
This has to be done everywhere because that's one of the biggest barriers to trans empowerment and survival. In the United Kingdom, the Methodist Church, which is the fourth largest denomination there, has voted for same-sex marriage 256 to 46. No minister is required to perform them. Anyway, but it's the largest denomination there to support same-sex marriage. The Church of England still doesn't.
In Canada, they passed a ban on conversion therapy, but the right-wing conservatives have delayed it and with a maneuver in the Senate. So that ban is not going to take effect for a few months.
Nice to see that the Pope is going to meet with Indigenous leaders from Canada to ask forgiveness for all the mistreatment and murders of children for generations. We're still waiting for our meeting.
In Luxembourg, the out-gay Prime Minister, Xavier Bettel, has been hospitalized with COVID, and he's described as in serious condition but stable.
In Tbilisi, capital of Georgia, the activists had to cancel the Pride March after violent clashes ahead of the parade. Violent anti-LGBT groups stormed the offices of the campaigners there. The organizers said that war has been declared against civil society and democratic values, and the government won't protect them.
But after all that happened, and they ransacked the office and brutalized about 20 journalists, the activists said, the hell with this, we're holding a march. And yesterday, Tuesday, 5,000 people showed up in the streets of Tbilisi and held their own march.
Great.
With a double rainbow appearing in the sky over the march. There were right-wingers who tried to crash in. The cops had to keep them separate. But it was a huge, huge victory for the activists in Tbilisi.
In Russia, an upscale health food supermarket rolled out an ad with a lesbian couple and their kids for Pride Month. They wanted to reflect real families among their shoppers. But the backlash was so intense. I mean, one of the kids said, our family got death threats over this, that the company pulled it and apologized for the unprofessionalism of the employees who made the ad.
In China, the WeChat social media network suddenly shut down all the LGBTQ social media groups at major universities. So that's a little shocker.
In Israel, 500 Israelis who have been married through Utah's online civil marriage service will not be registered by the Population and Immigration Authority of the Interior Ministry.
Because Israel only recognizes religious marriages.
Well, no, they've recognized some of these before, but now they're holding it up because of what the political.
In Brazil, Eduardo Leite, I'm making up that pronunciation, is running for president.
He's a center-right candidate. He's the first out-gay governor. Lula is the progressive choice.
Yeah. And in the Dominican Republic, there are ongoing demonstrations to protest the proposed new penal law because it has no anti-discrimination provisions, but does allow religious conscience discrimination. So we'll be following that. All right, AIDS news.
Sarah Schulman's Let the Record Show, Oral Histories of ACT UP New York, is being adapted into a TV series by Andrew Hay, who...
and Christine Vachon.
Yes, I was going to get to that, who directed Looking, about San Francisco gay men, and the movie Weekend. Anyway, yes.
At Oxford University, 13 HIV negative volunteers are getting the first jabs of an experimental anti-HIV vaccine. This is amazing news.
And it combines a range of variants. So announce results in April, folks. Don't,
prevention, treatment, whatever. We'll definitely follow that. And a French study says that in 4 West African cities in Burkina Faso, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Mali, gay men on PrEP have affected a 79% reduction in HIV positivity, even with spotty adherence. That's great news.
Yeah, the overall HIV incidence there is 1%, but it's 13% among men who have sex with men.
HIV positive cases up in Israel. People are claiming that they're getting this from men who claim to be on PrEP. Are they lying? Is this, misuse of PrEP? Who knows?
Entertainment news?
Yes.
Story of the week. A trans teen's physical artwork and non-fungible tokens netted $2.16 million at auctions at Christie's. Victor Langlois, aka Fouocious, is a rising star in the world of NFT art. As I said, we went into the wrong business. The lot represents Victor's life between the ages of 14 and 18 as he began to understand his gender identity, transitioned, and moved from Las Vegas to Seattle.
Wow.
He had an abusive upbringing, ran away at 12, raised by a grandmother who called his art ugly. Oh, grandma. But drew on iPad because not allowed to paint by grandma, and has earned $18 million over the last year, the youngest artist in Christie's selling history.
Less than 1 minute. Emma Corrin, who won a Golden Globe for playing Diana in The Crown and came out as queer a couple of months ago, has now posted pictures on her Instagram account of her in a binder for her top and announced they're using they, them pronouns.
Okay, hip-hop star Da Brat will take fans behind the scenes of her relationship with Jessica Judy Dupart in their own WE TV docuseries, Brat Loves Judy. Brat said, "I don't give an F anymore. I'm happy. That's what matters. I'm Da Brat. I'm out of the effing closet, living out loud with my baby because I love Judy and Judy loves me."
August 5th on WE TV, Gay USA next week, right here.
We
Bye.
give you good news if we can.